Poor girl accidentally drops ultrasound in front of Millionaire. The date on it leaves him frozen in shock. Everyone keeps asking me, Mr. Peter, why don't you upload a love story? This is a great love story, but you are hurting me too much by leaving early. I promise Chapter 10 will truly surprise you. Hi, my beautiful family. I send you my love, my prayers, and my blessings. Every story I create is not just a tale. It is my heart and soul, written only for you. I feel guilt when I make mistakes, because you trust me so much. Sometimes pressure makes me stumble like a little child, and I feel deeply ashamed. But I share everything with you, because you are my family. Please stay with me till the last second of every story. The endings are gifts I prepare with love only for you. If your heart is true, write present. If your love is real, write I am with Mr. Peter. And to my new family, if you doubt me, ask the old family. They know how much sacrifice and honesty I have given, not for fame, but for love. This is more than stories. This is us. This is family. Forever. Thunder crashed like God's own fury above the modest house on Elm Street, but even nature's violence couldn't drown out the venomous screaming that erupted from within its cracked walls. You filthy little whore. Jessica's voice sliced through the storm like a blade dipped in poison. Her 48-year-old face contorted with pure hatred as she towered over 22-year-old Bonnie, who cowered on the threadbare sofa. 3 months. 3 goddamn months you've been hiding this disgusting secret from us. Bonnie's trembling hands flew protectively to her barely visible bump, tears streaming down her pale cheeks. The ultrasound photo lay crumpled between them on the coffee table, its date glaring like an accusation. 12 weeks ago. Her stepmother had discovered it hidden beneath her mattress, and now her worst nightmare was becoming reality. "It's not what you think," Bonnie whispered, her voice barely audible above the storm's rage. "I didn't plan for this to happen. It was just one night and I—" The sharp crack of Jessica's palm across her face silenced her instantly. Bonnie's cheek burned with pain, but she refused to cry out. 10 years of living under this woman's roof had taught her that showing weakness only fed Jessica's cruelty. "One night of spreading your legs like a common streetwalker, you mean?" Jessica snarled, her perfectly manicured nails pointing accusingly. "Do you have any idea what this will do to our reputation? What the neighbors will think when they see you parading around with a bastard child?" "Jessica, please." Michael's weak voice came from the doorway. At 45, Bonnie's father had become a shadow of the man who once promised to protect her from the world. His shoulders slumped with defeat as he wrung his hands helplessly. "She's still my daughter. Maybe we can work something out." "Your daughter?" Jessica whirled around, her eyes blazing with fury. "Your daughter just destroyed 10 years of careful reputation building in this community. I've worked too hard to establish our standing for some pregnant little slut to ruin everything." Bonnie flinched at the cruel words, each one landing like a physical blow. She looked desperately at her father, silently begging him to stand up for her just once. But Michael's eyes dropped to the floor, and she knew with crushing certainty that she was completely alone. "Pack your things," Jessica commanded, grabbing Bonnie's arm with bruising force and yanking her to her feet. "You have 10 minutes to get out of my house forever." "Jessica, no!" Michael finally found his voice, but it carried no real authority. "She's pregnant. Where will she go in this storm?" "That's not our problem anymore," Jessica replied coldly, her smile twisted with satisfaction. "She made her bed with some random man. Now she can lie in it, preferably somewhere far away from decent people." Bonnie stumbled toward her tiny bedroom, her legs shaking with each step. This couldn't be happening. Yes, she had made a mistake, but didn't she deserve compassion? Didn't the life growing inside her deserve love, not hatred? Her bedroom looked exactly as it had when she was 12. Faded pink walls, a narrow bed with a quilt her mother had sewn, and a dresser that barely held together. She pulled out an old duffel bag and began stuffing her meager possessions inside. A few worn dresses, some books, a photograph of her beloved mother, and the precious ultrasound image that had started this nightmare. As she packed, Jessica's voice carried from the living room, already spinning lies for the neighbors. "We'll tell them she got a job opportunity in the city. A fresh start, you know. People love those kinds of success stories." Bonnie's hands trembled as she folded her mother's favorite sweater. Sarah would never have thrown her daughter out, pregnant or not. She would have held her, comforted her, and helped her figure out what to do next. But Sarah had been dead for 10 years, leaving Bonnie at the mercy of a woman who saw her as nothing more than an unwanted burden. "Time's up," Jessica's shrill voice cut through her memories like a knife. Bonnie shouldered her bag and walked back to the living room with as much dignity as she could muster. Her father stood by the window, his back turned, his shoulders shaking slightly. She wanted to run to him, to make him look at her one last time, but she knew it would only make things worse. "The storm is getting worse," Michael said quietly, still refusing to face her. "Maybe she could stay until morning." "Absolutely not," Jessica snapped. "She leaves now, or I leave and take half of everything with me in the divorce. Your choice, Michael." It wasn't really a choice at all. Michael had always chosen Jessica over Bonnie, and tonight would be no different. Bonnie walked to the door, her hand trembling on the handle. "Daddy?" she whispered, hoping against hope that he would turn around, that he would choose his daughter over his wife just this once. But Michael remained frozen by the window, and Bonnie's heart shattered completely. "Don't ever come back," Jessica said as Bonnie opened the door, "and don't expect any help from us. You're dead to this family now." The freezing rain hit Bonnie like a physical assault as she stepped into the night. The door slammed shut behind her with a finality that echoed in her chest like a death knell. She stood there for a moment, completely soaked within seconds, staring at the house that had never really felt like home anyway. Lightning illuminated the empty street, and Bonnie realized she had nowhere to go. No friends who would take her in, no relatives who cared enough to help. She was truly alone in the world, with nothing but the clothes on her back and a baby growing inside her. She began walking, not knowing where her feet were taking her, just knowing she had to move. The rain plastered her long hair to her face, and her thin jacket did nothing to protect her from the bone-chilling cold. But she kept walking, one foot in front of the other, because stopping meant accepting that this was really happening. Hours later, she found herself in the business district downtown, where gleaming glass towers reached toward the storm-darkened sky like silver fingers. The streets were empty, except for the occasional taxi, and Bonnie realized she must look like a drowned rat stumbling through the financial district at midnight. She paused in front of a particularly impressive building, Jasper Industries, according to the gold lettering on the front. Even through her exhaustion and despair, she couldn't help but be awed by its grandeur. This was the kind of place where powerful people made decisions that changed lives with the stroke of a pen. Bonnie reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out the ultrasound photo, now damp from the rain. The date was barely visible, but she could still make it out. 12 weeks ago. 12 weeks since the night that had changed everything. 12 weeks since she had met a stranger at a charity event and made what everyone would call the biggest mistake of her life. But was it really a mistake? As she stared at the tiny form in the grainy image, she felt a fierce protectiveness surge through her exhausted body. This baby was innocent. This baby deserved love, even if the world seemed determined to reject them both. A sudden gust of wind tore the photo from her numb fingers, sending it tumbling across the wet pavement like a leaf in a hurricane. "No!" Bonnie cried out, lunging forward desperately. This was all she had left of hope, the only proof that something good might come from all this pain. She didn't see the man stepping out of the building until it was too late. They collided hard, sending both of them stumbling. Bonnie fell to her knees on the cold pavement, frantically searching for the ultrasound in the darkness. "I'm so sorry," she gasped, looking up at the man she had crashed into. Even in the dim light from the street lamps, she could see he was impeccably dressed in an expensive suit, his dark hair perfectly styled despite the rain. He was probably some important executive, and she had just ruined his evening. But the man wasn't looking at her. His storm-grey eyes were fixed on something on the ground between them. Following his gaze, Bonnie saw her ultrasound photo lying face up on the wet concrete, the date clearly visible under the streetlight. The man bent down and picked up the photo, studying it with an intensity that made her breath catch. His expression changed from annoyance to confusion to something that looked almost like recognition. He remained completely still for a long moment, rain dripping from his perfectly styled hair as he stared at the image. "This date," he said quietly, his voice barely audible over the storm. His eyes met Bonnie's, and she saw something in them that made her heart race. 12 weeks ago. Bonnie nodded, not trusting her voice. There was something about this man, something familiar that she couldn't quite place. The way he was looking at her, the way he held the ultrasound photo like it was precious. Lightning flashed again, illuminating both their faces clearly for just a moment. And in that instant, Bonnie remembered where she had seen those eyes before. The man, tall, devastatingly handsome, with eyes the color of storm clouds, continued to stare at the ultrasound photo. His hands were shaking slightly, and his face had gone pale despite the cold rain. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice rough with an emotion she couldn't identify. "Bonnie," she whispered, wrapping her arms around herself as the wind picked up. He looked up at her again, and this time there was no mistaking the recognition in his eyes. "Bonnie," he repeated slowly, as if testing how her name felt on his tongue. "The charity gala. 12 weeks ago." It wasn't a question. It was a statement, and Bonnie felt her world tilt on its axis. This was him. This was the man from that night, the one who had shown her kindness when she felt invisible, who had made her feel beautiful and wanted for just a few precious hours. "Finley?" she breathed, remembering his name now. Finley Jasper nodded slowly, still holding her ultrasound photo. CEO of Jasper Industries, millionaire, one of the most powerful men in the city. And possibly, no, definitely, the father of her unborn child. They stared at each other in the rain, both realizing that this chance encounter was anything but chance. Fate had brought them together again, on the worst night of Bonnie's life, when she had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. The storm raged around them, but neither moved. The ultrasound photo between them told a story that would change both their lives forever. The deed, not trusting her voice. There was something about this man, something familiar that she couldn't quite place. The way he was looking at her, the way he held the ultrasound photo like it was precious. Lightning flashed again, illuminating both their faces clearly for just a moment, and in that instant, Bonnie remembered where she had seen those eyes before. The man, tall, devastatingly handsome, with eyes the color of storm clouds, continued to stare at the ultrasound photo. His hands were shaking slightly, and his face had gone pale despite the cold rain. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice rough with an emotion she couldn't identify. "Bonnie," she whispered, wrapping her arms around herself as the wind picked up. He looked up at her again, and this time there was no mistaking the recognition in his eyes. "Bonnie," he repeated slowly, as if testing how her name felt on his tongue. "The charity gala, 12 weeks ago." It wasn't a question, it was a statement, and Bonnie felt her world tilt on its axis. This was him. This was the man from that night, the one who had shown her kindness when she felt invisible, who had made her feel beautiful and wanted for just a few precious hours. "Finley?" she breathed, remembering his name now. Finley Jasper nodded slowly, still holding her ultrasound photo. CEO of Jasper Industries, millionaire, one of the most powerful men in the city, and possibly, no, definitely, the father of her unborn child. They stared at each other in the rain, both realizing that this chance encounter was anything but chance. Fate had brought them together again on the worst night of Bonnie's life, when she had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. The storm raged around them, but neither moved. The ultrasound photo between them told a story that would change both their lives forever. Chapter 2. Recognition. The silence stretched between them like a wire about to snap, heavy with the weight of recognition and unspoken truth. Finley Jasper stood motionless in the torrential downpour, the ultrasound photo trembling in his hands as memories crashed over him like tidal waves. 12 weeks ago. The annual Children's Hospital Charity Gala. He had been exhausted from a brutal merger negotiation when he'd spotted her sitting alone at a back table, breathtaking in a simple dress that probably cost less than his tie. She had been different from the usual crowd of gold diggers and social climbers who frequented such events. There was something genuine about her, something pure that had drawn him like a magnet. They had talked for hours about everything and nothing, her dreams of becoming a teacher, his complicated relationship with his family, the way the city lights looked from his penthouse window. One magical thing had led to another, and they had spent the night together in his penthouse suite. It had been passionate, tender, and completely life-changing. But when he woke the next morning, she had vanished like a beautiful dream. No note, no number, nothing but her lingering perfume and a memory that had haunted him for months. "Bonnie," he said again, his voice barely a whisper, "you left." She wrapped her arms tighter around herself, shivering in the cold rain. "I didn't belong there," she replied, her voice small and broken. "I was just serving drinks at the event. I wasn't supposed to. We weren't supposed to. But we did." Finley stepped closer, studying her face in the dim streetlight. She looked thinner than he remembered, her cheeks hollow with exhaustion and stress. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her clothes were soaked through. "And now you're pregnant." It wasn't an accusation, just a statement of fact. Bonnie nodded, unable to meet his gaze. "I tried to find you," she whispered, "but your company, they said you were traveling, and I didn't know how to reach you. I was just a waitress. Who was I to bother Finley Jasper?" Finley felt something twist in his chest, guilt, regret, and something else he couldn't name. "You should have tried harder." The words came out harsher than he intended, and he saw her flinch. "I mean, if you had reached out, what would you have done?" Bonnie looked up at him then, her eyes flashing with a spark of defiance despite her broken state. "Would you have believed me? Or would you have thought I was just another woman trying to trap a rich man?" Finley opened his mouth to protest, but the words died in his throat. Because honestly, he wasn't sure what he would have thought. His world was full of people who wanted something from him, who saw him as a walking bank account rather than a person. Trust didn't come easily to him. But looking at her now, soaked and shivering, and clearly at the end of her rope, he knew with absolute certainty that this woman wasn't a gold digger. She was scared, alone, and carrying what was most likely his child. "Come with me," he said suddenly, removing his expensive coat and draping it around her shoulders. It swallowed her small frame, but at least it would provide some warmth. "You're freezing, and we need to talk." Bonnie hesitated, clutching the coat around herself. I can't impose. I just needed the photo back. I'll figure something else out." "Figure what out?" Finley's eyes narrowed as he took in her appearance more carefully. The duffel bag slung over her shoulder, her soaked clothes, the desperate way she'd chased after the ultrasound photo. "Bonnie, where were you going tonight?" "It's past midnight, and you're wandering around downtown in a storm." Fresh tears mixed with the rain on her cheeks. I don't have anywhere to go, she admitted, the words seeming to physically pain her. My stepmother. She kicked me out when she found the ultrasound. Said I was a disgrace to the family. Finley felt a surge of anger so intense it surprised him. She threw you out? Tonight? In this weather? While you're pregnant? Bonnie nodded miserably. My father, he didn't stop her. He never stops her. Her voice broke completely then. I don't have anyone else. No friends, no relatives who care. I was just walking, trying to figure out what to do. Without another word, Finley took her arm gently and guided her toward his car, a sleek black Mercedes parked at the curb. You're coming home with me, he said firmly. I can't. Bonnie started to protest. Yes, you can. Finley opened the passenger door and helped her inside, cranking up the heat immediately. We have a lot to discuss, and you need somewhere warm and dry to do it. As they drove through the storm-lashed streets, Finley stole glances at Bonnie. She sat rigidly in the passenger seat, his coat still wrapped around her, staring out at the passing city lights with a lost expression. She looked so young, so vulnerable, and the protective instinct that surged through him was almost overwhelming. Tell me about the pregnancy, he said softly as they stopped at a red light. Are you taking care of yourself? Bonnie turned to look at him, surprise flickering across her features. I try to. I've been to the clinic a few times when I could afford it. The baby seems healthy. She placed a protective hand over her small bump. I've been working extra shifts at the diner to save money, but with Jessica, with my stepmother finding out. You've been working in a diner while pregnant? Finley's jaw tightened. What about prenatal vitamins, proper nutrition, regular checkups? I do what I can, Bonnie said defensively. I'm not stupid, Finley. I know what the baby needs, but I don't exactly have unlimited resources. Finley pulled into the circular driveway of his massive estate, the headlights illuminating the imposing stone facade of the Jasper family mansion. He heard Bonnie's sharp intake of breath as she took in the sheer size and grandeur of the property. This is where you live, she whispered, her eyes wide. It's the family home, Finley replied, parking near the front entrance. I have my own place in the city, but my grandmother lives here, and she's the only family member worth knowing. Bonnie clutched her small bag tighter as they approached the massive front door. Finley, I really don't think this is a good idea. What will your family think? What will they say about me showing up like this? Finley paused with his hand on the door handle, considering her question. His family, his cold, status-obsessed mother Amanda, his arrogant brother Andrew, his spoiled sister Ashley. They would take one look at Bonnie and see exactly what Jessica had seen. A poor girl who'd gotten herself pregnant and was now trying to climb the social ladder. But his grandmother Eleanor was different. She had always been the heart of the family, the one person who valued kindness over status, love over money. If anyone would welcome Bonnie, it would be her. Let me worry about my family, he said finally, opening the door and ushering her inside. The mansion's foyer was a study in old money elegance, marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and a sweeping staircase that curved gracefully to the second floor. Bonnie stopped dead in her tracks, clearly overwhelmed by the opulence surrounding her. Finley? Is that you, dear? An elderly voice called from the sitting room. Yes, grandmother, Finley replied, placing a gentle hand on Bonnie's lower back to guide her forward. I've brought someone I'd like you to meet. Eleanor Jasper appeared in the doorway, a small, elegant woman in her 70s with silver hair and kind eyes. She took in the scene, her grandson standing protectively beside a young, pregnant woman who was clearly in distress, and her expression softened immediately. Oh, you poor dear, Eleanor said, moving toward Bonnie with open arms. Come in, you're absolutely soaked. Finley, what were you thinking bringing this sweet girl out in such weather? It's not his fault, Bonnie said quickly, accepting Eleanor's warm embrace despite her confusion. I was already out in the storm when we met. Eleanor pulled back and studied Bonnie's face with the shrewd eyes of someone who had seen much of life. Were you now? Well, that's a story I'd like to hear. But first, let's get you into some dry clothes and get some hot food in you. You look absolutely exhausted. Grandmother, this is Bonnie, Finley said quietly. Bonnie, my grandmother, Eleanor Jasper. It's lovely to meet you, Mrs. Jasper, Bonnie said, managing a small smile despite everything. But I really don't want to impose. If I could just— Nonsense, Eleanor said briskly, linking her arm through Bonnie's. Any friend of Finley's is welcome here. Besides, you're clearly in need of some kindness, and I've always had plenty to spare. As Eleanor led Bonnie toward the stairs, chattering about warm baths and hot soup, Finley heard the sound of footsteps from the direction of the sitting room. His heart sank as he recognized the sharp click of his mother's heels on marble. Finley? Amanda Jasper appeared, perfectly coiffed despite the late hour. At 52, she maintained an icy beauty that matched her cold personality, her blue eyes immediately zeroing in on Bonnie. What on earth is going on? Who is this person? Behind her came Andrew and Ashley, both clearly annoyed at being disturbed from their evening entertainment. Andrew was 26, 2 years younger than Finley, with the same dark hair but none of his older brother's depth or compassion. Ashley, 24, was beautiful in a cold, calculating way that reminded Finley uncomfortably of their mother. This is Bonnie, Eleanor said firmly before Finley could speak. She'll be staying with us for a while. Staying with us? Ashley's voice rose an octave. Mother, look at her. She's obviously some kind of charity case, and she's pregnant. We can't have pregnant strays cluttering up the house. Finley felt his temper flare. Ashley. No, it's all right, Bonnie said quietly, stepping back from Eleanor's protective embrace. They're right. I don't belong here. This was a mistake. She turned toward the door, but Eleanor caught her arm gently. You most certainly do belong here, the older woman said firmly, her eyes flashing with uncharacteristic anger as she looked at her other grandchildren. Anyone who needs help is welcome in this house, and I won't hear another word about it. Grandmother, Andrew said with barely concealed disdain, surely you can see that this girl is obviously looking for a handout, probably saw Finley's car and decided to play the victim. Actually, Finley said, his voice deadly quiet, Bonnie and I have met before, and she's not looking for anything except basic human decency, which seems to be in short supply around here. Amanda's eyes narrowed as she studied the interaction between her son and the bedraggled young woman. Something about Finley's protective stance, the way he was looking at Bonnie, set off alarm bells in her socially conscious mind. How do you know this girl, Finley? Amanda asked, her voice sharp with suspicion. Finley met his mother's gaze steadily. That's between Bonnie and me. Everything that happens in this house is my business, Amanda replied coldly. If you're bringing pregnant strays home, I have a right to know why. She's not a stray, Eleanor said firmly, moving to stand beside Bonnie in a show of support. She's a young woman in need of help, and any decent person would offer it without question. Ashley laughed cruelly. Oh, please, grandmother, look at her. Cheap clothes, no wedding ring, obviously from the wrong side of town. How much do you want to bet she doesn't even know who the father is? Bonnie flinched as if she'd been slapped, her face going pale. Finley stepped forward, his eyes blazing with anger. That's enough, he said dangerously. One more word, Ashley, and you can find somewhere else to live. You can't kick me out of the family home, Ashley protested. Actually, I can, Finley replied, since I'm the one who pays for your lifestyle. An uncomfortable silence fell over the group. It was true. Finley was the CEO of Jasper Industries, the one who had built the family fortune into what it was today. Without his success, none of them would be living in such luxury. Eleanor broke the tension by placing a protective arm around Bonnie's shoulders. "Come along, dear," she said gently. "Let's get you settled. The rest of this family can remember their manners or find somewhere else to be." As Eleanor led Bonnie up the stairs, Finley heard his grandmother murmuring soothingly to the younger woman. "Don't mind them, sweetheart. They've forgotten what it means to be human. But you're safe now. I'll make sure of it." Finley watched them go, his heart heavy with conflicting emotions. The baby Bonnie was carrying was most likely his, which meant he was about to become a father. But more than that, seeing her again, seeing her strength in the face of such cruelty, he realized that what he'd felt for her 12 weeks ago hadn't been just a passing attraction. He was falling for her all over again, and this time, he wasn't going to let her slip away. Behind him, he could hear his mother and siblings whispering angrily among themselves, already plotting ways to get rid of the unwanted guest. But Finley didn't care. For the first time in months, he felt like he had something worth fighting for. Bonnie was home now, whether she knew it or not, and he was going to make sure she stayed that way. Chapter 3. The only allied dawn broke through the tall windows of the Jasper mansion like liquid gold, but Bonnie had barely slept a wink. She lay in the enormous four-poster bed that Eleanor had insisted she take, staring at the ornate ceiling and trying to process everything that had happened. Just 12 hours ago, she had been homeless and desperate. Now she was surrounded by luxury beyond her wildest dreams, yet she felt more out of place than ever. The bedroom Eleanor had given her was larger than the entire living room in her father's house. Rich burgundy drapes framed windows that overlooked perfectly manicured gardens, and the furniture looked like it belonged in a museum. But despite the comfort, Bonnie couldn't shake the feeling that she was an intruder in this world of wealth and privilege. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called, sitting up and smoothing down the silk nightgown Eleanor had lent her. "Good morning, sweetheart." Eleanor entered carrying a silver tray laden with food. "I thought you might be hungry. You hardly ate anything last night." Bonnie's stomach growled in response to the delicious smells wafting from the tray. "Mrs. Jasper, you don't need to wait on me. I can come down to the kitchen." "Nonsense." Eleanor set the tray on the bedside table and settled into the nearby armchair. "And please, call me Eleanor. We're going to be friends, I can tell." As Bonnie gratefully accepted the plate of fresh fruit, scrambled eggs and toast, Eleanor studied her with kind but shrewd eyes. "Now then, dear, would you like to tell me how you really know my grandson?" Bonnie nearly choked on her orange juice. We met at a charity event." "Yes, I gathered that much from the conversation last night." Eleanor smiled gently. "But there's more to the story, isn't there? The way Finley looked at you, the way he immediately brought you home. That's not typical behavior for my grandson, I assure you." Heat flooded Bonnie's cheeks. She had hoped to avoid this conversation, but Eleanor's perceptive gaze told her there was no point in lying. We spent the night together, after the gala. It was just one night, and I left the next morning. I didn't think I'd ever see him again." Eleanor nodded thoughtfully. "And the baby?" "Is his," Bonnie whispered, placing a protective hand over her bump. "I tried to contact him when I found out, but I couldn't get through to him. His company wouldn't take my calls." "Oh, my dear child." Eleanor reached over and squeezed Bonnie's free hand. "That must have been terrifying, facing this alone." Tears pricked at Bonnie's eyes. When was the last time someone had shown her such genuine compassion? "I managed. I've been working extra hours, saving what I could, but when Jessica found the ultrasound—" "Jessica?" "My stepmother. She's not a kind woman." Bonnie's voice grew quiet. "She's made my life difficult since she married my father when I was 12, but last night was the worst it's ever been." Eleanor's expression hardened. "She threw you out because you're pregnant." Bonnie nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Eleanor's face flushed with anger. That woman should be ashamed of herself. What kind of person abandons a pregnant girl? The same kind who's been making my life miserable for 10 years, Bonnie said bitterly. Then she caught herself. I'm sorry, I shouldn't speak badly about family. Family is supposed to love and protect you, Eleanor said firmly. What that woman did isn't family behavior. It's cruelty, plain and simple. Before Bonnie could respond, raised voices echoed from somewhere in the house. Eleanor sighed deeply. That would be Amanda and the children, no doubt discussing your presence. I'm afraid they weren't raised with much compassion. As if summoned by their conversation, sharp footsteps echoed in the hallway, followed by Amanda's cold voice. Mother, we need to talk. Amanda entered without waiting for permission. Her perfect blonde hair already styled, despite the early hour. Behind her trailed Ashley, looking as coldly beautiful as her mother. Good morning, Amanda. Ashley, Eleanor's voice was noticeably cooler. I trust you slept well. I would have slept better if I wasn't worrying about strangers in our home, Amanda replied, her gaze fixed pointedly on Bonnie. Mother, this situation is completely inappropriate. We know nothing about this girl. Her name is Bonnie, Eleanor said sharply, and she's a guest in this house. Ashley stepped forward, her designer outfit making Bonnie acutely aware of the borrowed nightgown she wore. A guest? Really, grandmother? She's obviously some sort of gold digger who's latched onto Finley, probably saw him coming out of the building and staged the whole encounter. That's not true, Bonnie said quietly, but Ashley continued as if she hadn't spoken. Look at her. Cheap clothes, no education, no class. She's exactly the type who would try to trap a wealthy man with a pregnancy. Eleanor stood abruptly, her small frame radiating fury. Ashley Marie Jasper, you will apologize this instant. I will not. Ashley lifted her chin defiantly. Someone needs to say what we're all thinking. This girl doesn't belong here. Amanda placed a restraining hand on her daughter's arm, but her own expression remained cold. Mother, while Ashley could have been more diplomatic, she's not wrong. This young woman's presence creates complications. What will people think when word gets out that Finley is harboring some pregnant girl of questionable background? I don't care what people think, Eleanor snapped, and neither should you. Easy for you to say, Ashley muttered. You don't have to face the country club gossips. Bonnie had heard enough. She set down her plate with shaking hands and stood up. You're right, she said quietly. I don't belong here. I'll pack my things and go. You'll do no such thing, Eleanor said firmly, but Bonnie was already moving toward the dresser where her meager belongings had been placed. Really, it's better this way, Bonnie said, trying to keep her voice steady. I appreciate your kindness, Eleanor, but they're right. I'm not part of this world. Bonnie, Eleanor started, but Amanda cut her off. Actually, Mother, perhaps the girl is showing some sense after all. That's when Ashley made her cruelest move yet. With a malicious smile that would have made a snake proud, she sauntered over to the breakfast tray and deliberately swept it to the floor with vicious force, sending fine china exploding and food splattering across the priceless Persian carpet. Oops, Ashley purred with venomous innocence. How clumsy of me. But I suppose trash like you is accustomed to cleaning up messes, aren't you? The deliberate cruelty of the act hung in the air like poison. Bonnie stared at the broken dishes and ruined food, her hands instinctively moving to protect her belly. This was Jessica all over again. The same calculated meanness, the same pleasure in causing pain. But before anyone could react, Finley's voice cut through the tension like a blade. What the hell is going on here? He stood in the doorway, his hair still damp from a shower, his face thunderous as he took in the scene, Bonnie standing pale and shaken, the broken dishes on the floor, and his sister's triumphant expression. Ashley knocked over the breakfast tray, Eleanor said, her voice tight with controlled anger. Deliberately. Finley's gaze moved from the mess to his sister's face, and something dangerous flickered in his eyes. Is that true? It was an accident, Ashley said, but her smirk gave her away. An accident, Finley repeated slowly. Like your comments last night were an accident? Amanda stepped forward. Finley, we were just trying to make your friend understand that this arrangement isn't appropriate. What's not appropriate, Finley said, his voice deadly quiet, is the way you're treating a pregnant woman who's done nothing wrong except need help. He moved to Bonnie's side, and she was surprised by the comfort his presence brought her. Are you all right? Bonnie nodded, not trusting her voice. But Finley must have seen something in her expression, because his jaw tightened even further. Ashley, he said without taking his eyes off Bonnie, you have exactly 1 minute to apologize, or you can start looking for somewhere else to live. You can't be serious, Ashley gasped. Try me. Finley's tone brooked no argument. And that goes for anyone else who thinks it's acceptable to treat Bonnie with anything less than respect. Amanda's face flushed with anger. Finley, this is still the family home, which I pay for, Finley reminded her, which means my rules apply. The silence stretched taut until Ashley finally spoke, her voice sullen. Fine, I'm sorry for the accident. That's not an apology, Eleanor said sharply. That's barely even words. But Finley held up a hand. It's enough. For now. He turned to Bonnie. Come on, let's get you some fresh air. As they left the room together, Bonnie could hear Ashley hissing angrily to her mother. I can't believe he's choosing some random pregnant girl over his own family. This isn't over. Amanda's voice was ice cold. One way or another, that girl has to go. But Eleanor's voice followed them into the hallway, clear and strong. The only ones who need to go are people who've forgotten how to be decent human beings. Finley led Bonnie through the mansion to a pair of French doors that opened onto a beautiful terrace overlooking the gardens. The morning air was crisp and clean after the previous night's storm, and Bonnie breathed deeply, trying to calm her racing heart. I'm sorry about them, Finley said quietly. They weren't always like this, but money and status have made them cold. Your grandmother is wonderful, Bonnie said, managing a small smile. She's been so kind to me. She has good instincts about people, Finley replied. She liked you immediately. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the sun climb higher in the sky. Then Finley turned to face her fully. Bonnie, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Her heart skipped a beat. What? The baby, he said gently. Are you certain it's mine? The question shouldn't have hurt. It was perfectly reasonable under the circumstances, but somehow it did, cutting deeper than Ashley's cruelty or Amanda's coldness. Yes, she whispered. You're the only man I've ever... The only one. Finley's expression softened. I had to ask, but I believe you. He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts, which means we need to figure out what happens next. Before Bonnie could respond, Eleanor appeared in the doorway. Breakfast is served in the morning room, she announced cheerfully, and I've made it very clear that anyone who disrupts the meal will be eating their next one somewhere else. As they followed Eleanor inside, Bonnie felt a spark of hope. Maybe she didn't belong in this world of wealth and privilege, but perhaps, with Eleanor's protection and Finley's growing support, she could find a place here. She just had to survive his family's efforts to drive her away. But as they entered the morning room and she saw the cold looks from Amanda and Ashley, Bonnie realized that the real battle was just beginning. They would stop at nothing to get rid of her, and she would need all her strength to protect not just herself, but the innocent life growing inside her. The war for acceptance had only just begun. Chapter 4. Growing closer. 3 weeks had passed since Bonnie's arrival at the Jasper mansion, and the rhythm of her new life was slowly settling into place. She woke each morning to Eleanor's gentle knock and warm smile, spent her days reading in the library or walking the beautiful gardens, and found herself looking forward to the evenings when Finley would return from work. The man who had once seemed so distant and powerful now felt like a friend, someone who genuinely cared about her well-being. This particular afternoon found them in Dr. Harrison's office for Bonnie's scheduled prenatal appointment. Finley had insisted on coming along, much to the surprise of both Bonnie and the medical staff, who were clearly wondering about their relationship. "Everything looks perfect, Doctor," Harrison announced, sliding the ultrasound wand across Bonnie's growing belly. "Baby is developing beautifully, right on schedule for someone who's 16 weeks along." Bonnie stared at the screen in wonder. The baby was so much bigger than in her first ultrasound, more clearly defined. She could make out tiny fingers and toes, the curve of the spine, the gentle flutter of a heartbeat. "Is that—" Finley leaned forward, his voice filled with awe. "The heart," Dr. Harrison confirmed with a smile. "Strong and steady. Would you like to hear it?" The sound filled the small room, a rapid, rhythmic whooshing that seemed to echo in Bonnie's chest. She felt tears spring to her eyes as the reality of this tiny life hit her all over again. But it was Finley's reaction that truly moved her. His hand found hers, squeezing gently as he stared at the screen with an expression of pure wonder. When he looked at her, his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Our baby," he whispered, and the reverent way he said "our" sent electric shivers through Bonnie's entire being. Without conscious thought, she guided his hand to her belly, pressing his palm against the exact spot where the doctor had been examining. For a breathless eternity, they remained connected like that, united by this tiny miracle they had created in a moment of perfect love. "I've been feeling little flutters for the past few days," Bonnie said softly, her voice filled with wonder. "Just tiny movements, like butterfly wings." "That's perfectly normal for 16 weeks, especially for someone as slender as you," Dr. Harrison explained. "First-time mothers often feel those initial movements between 15 and 20 weeks. It's one of the most magical parts of pregnancy." Finley's face blazed with such happiness that Bonnie felt her own heart soar. "I wish I could feel it too," he said wistfully, his hand still resting protectively over their child. Dr. Harrison smiled knowingly. "It's still quite early for partners to feel movement from the outside. That usually happens closer to 24 to 28 weeks, when the baby gets stronger and bigger. But every pregnancy is different." As if responding to their conversation, Bonnie gasped softly. "Oh, there it is again, stronger this time." She looked up at Finley with shining eyes. "I know you can't feel it yet, but our baby is definitely saying hello." In that sacred moment, surrounded by the gentle symphony of medical equipment and the irrefutable evidence of their child's vibrant health, everything else simply evaporated. The future stretched before them, filled with countless moments like this, tiny hands to hold, first steps to witness, bedtime stories to share. The drive home was filled with comfortable conversation about baby names, nursery colors, and the future. It was the first time Bonnie had allowed herself to truly imagine what life might look like with this child, and having Finley there to share in the excitement made it feel real in a way it never had before. "Have you thought about what you want to do?" Finley asked as they pulled into the mansion's driveway. "About work, I mean, after the baby comes." Bonnie hesitated. "I've always wanted to teach," she admitted. "Elementary school. I love children, and I think I'd be good at it. But I never finished college. Jessica always said it was a waste of money for someone like me." Finley's jaw tightened at the mention of her stepmother. "Jessica was wrong about a lot of things. If teaching is what you want to do, we'll make it happen." "We?" Bonnie looked at him curiously. "I want to be part of this, Bonnie," Finley said seriously. "Part of raising our child, part of your life. If you'll let me." Before Bonnie could respond, they were interrupted by the sight of a black car parked near the front entrance. Finley frowned. "That's Andrew's car. I wonder what he's doing here in the middle of the day." They found Andrew in the main sitting room with Amanda and Ashley, all three of them wearing expressions of barely contained excitement. Eleanor sat across from them, her face carefully neutral, but her eyes flashing with warning. "Finley," Amanda rose as they entered. "Perfect timing. We have wonderful news." "What kind of news?" Finley asked suspiciously, keeping Bonnie close to his side. Andrew stepped forward with a self-satisfied smile. "I've been doing some research on your little friend here. Very interesting what you can find when you know where to look." Bonnie felt a chill run down her spine. "What do you mean?" "Well," Ashley said with false sweetness, "it turns out your father has quite the reputation around town. Did you know he's been arrested twice for public drunkenness? And your stepmother Jessica has been spreading some fascinating stories about you at the country club." "That's enough," Eleanor said sharply, but Andrew wasn't finished. "The best part," he continued, clearly enjoying himself, "is what Jessica told the ladies at Bridge Club about why you really left home. Apparently, it had nothing to do with being pregnant. Apparently, you've been stealing from local businesses for months." "That's not true," Bonnie gasped, her face going pale. "Jessica has receipts," Amanda added smoothly. "Store owners who've reported missing money after you worked shifts. A pattern of small thefts that finally caught up with you." Finley stepped protectively in front of Bonnie. "This is ridiculous. Jessica threw Bonnie out because she was pregnant, not because of any supposed theft." "Are you sure about that?" Ashley asked with mock concern. "I mean, how well do you really know her? You spent one night together, and now she's living in our house, eating our food, claiming to carry your child." "The baby is mine," Finley said dangerously. "So you say," Andrew shrugged. "But has there been a paternity test, any real proof beyond her word?" Bonnie felt the walls closing in around her. This was exactly what she had feared, that Finley's family would find ways to turn him against her. The lies about stealing were particularly cruel because she knew how they would sound to people who already distrusted her. "None of this matters," Finley said firmly. "Even if any of it were true, which I doubt, it doesn't change the fact that Bonnie is carrying my child and she's under my protection." "Your protection?" Amanda laughed coldly. "Finley, darling, you're being manipulated by a very clever girl who saw an opportunity and took it. This whole innocent act is just that. An act." Eleanor stood abruptly. "I've heard quite enough of this poisonous gossip. Andrew, if you have nothing better to do than spread lies about a pregnant girl, perhaps you should find somewhere else to do it." "Grandmother," Ashley said with fake concern, "we're just trying to protect Finley from making a terrible mistake. This girl is obviously after his money." "The only mistake here," Eleanor replied icily, "is raising children who have so little compassion they would attack a young woman in her condition." But the damage was already done. Bonnie could see the seeds of doubt that had been planted, even in Finley's protective stance. She knew how this would go. Slowly, steadily, his family would chip away at his trust until he began to question everything she had told him. "I should go," Bonnie said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "No," Finley said immediately. "You're not going anywhere." "Finley's right," Eleanor added firmly. "You belong here, with people who care about you." But Bonnie could see the satisfaction in Amanda's eyes, the triumph in Ashley's smile. They had accomplished exactly what they set out to do, make her feel unwelcome, unwanted, and unworthy of the life she was starting to build here. As the family continued to argue around her, Bonnie placed a protective hand over her belly, feeling the baby's gentle movements. Whatever happened, she would protect this child, even if it meant walking away from the first real happiness she had known in years. But when she looked up and saw Finley watching her with concern and determination, she realized that maybe, just maybe, she wouldn't have to face this battle alone after all. "We need to talk," Finley said quietly, taking her hand. "All of us. And we're going to settle this once and for all." The confrontation was far from over, but for the first time since Andrew had started speaking, Bonnie felt a flicker of hope. Finley hadn't wavered, hadn't shown any signs of believing his family's lies. Perhaps their growing connection was stronger than she had dared to believe. Chapter 5. Love Blooms. The evening air was crisp with the promise of autumn, as Finley led Bonnie through the mansion's private gardens, away from the toxic atmosphere his family had created inside. "I'm sorry about earlier," he said quietly, his hand warm and reassuring as it held hers. "What they did was unforgivable." Bonnie squeezed his fingers gently. "You don't need to apologize for them. I know you don't believe those lies." "Of course I don't." Finley stopped walking and turned to face her, his eyes intense in the fading light. "Bonnie, I've spent every day with you for the past 3 weeks. I've seen your kindness, your strength, your genuine heart. My family's accusations say more about them than they do about you." They had reached the center of the garden, where a small gazebo sat surrounded by rose bushes that still bloomed despite the cooling weather. Finley guided her to the bench inside, and they sat close together, watching the first stars appear in the darkening sky. "Tell me about your dreams," Finley said softly. "Before all this happened, before the pregnancy, before my family's cruelty, what did you want from life?" Bonnie was quiet for a moment, considering. "I wanted to matter," she said finally. "I wanted to have a job that made a difference. Maybe teach children who needed someone to believe in them. I wanted a family of my own someday, not like the one I grew up in, but a real family built on love and respect." "And now?" Finley's voice was gentle, encouraging. "Now I'm terrified," Bonnie admitted. "Everything's changed so fast. A month ago, I was barely surviving, working double shifts and living with Jessica's constant criticism. Now I'm here in this beautiful place with you, and sometimes I feel like I'm going to wake up and find it's all been a dream." Finley reached up and cupped her face gently, his thumb tracing along her cheekbone. "It's not a dream, Bonnie. This is real. What I feel for you is real." Her breath caught in her throat. "What you feel for me." "I've been falling for you since that first night at the charity gala," Finley confessed, his voice rough with emotion. "You were so different from everyone else there. Genuine, kind, beautiful, in a way that had nothing to do with expensive clothes or perfect makeup. When you disappeared the next morning, I couldn't stop thinking about you." Finley ... Bonnie's voice was barely a whisper. "I know this is complicated," he continued, his forehead resting against hers. "I know the timing isn't ideal, and my family is making everything harder. But I need you to know that what's happening between us isn't just about the baby. It's about you, about who you are, about the way you make me feel." "How do I make you feel?" she asked, her heart racing. "Like I'm home," he said simply. "Like all the empty spaces in my life suddenly make sense." Before she could lose her nerve, Bonnie eliminated the distance between them, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that was velvet soft and achingly sweet, overflowing with all the emotions she'd been terrified to voice. Finley responded instantly, his arms encircling her as he deepened the kiss, pouring years of soul-crushing loneliness and desperate hope into their connection. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Bonnie rested her head against Finley's chest, listening to the rapid beat of his heart. "I'm scared," she whispered against his shirt. "Of what?" "Of believing this. Of letting myself hope that someone like you could really care about someone like me." Finley pulled back enough to look at her, his expression fierce. "Someone like you? Bonnie, you're incredible. You're carrying our child with grace and strength despite everything you've been through. You face my family's cruelty with dignity. You've been thrown into a world completely different from anything you've known, and you handle it all with such courage." "I don't feel courageous," Bonnie said with a shaky laugh. "Most of the time I feel like I'm barely holding it together." "That's what courage is," Finley replied, brushing a strand of hair away from her face. "Being scared but doing what needs to be done anyway." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, wrapped in each other's arms as the night settled around them. The garden was peaceful, a stark contrast to the tension inside the mansion, and Bonnie found herself wishing they could stay here forever. "What happens now?" she asked eventually. "Now we take things one day at a time," Finley said. "We focus on you and the baby, and we don't let anyone else's opinions matter. Your family won't give up easily. Then they'll learn that I can be just as stubborn as they are." Finley's voice carried a note of steel that reminded Bonnie of his reputation as a formidable businessman. "I've built an empire from nothing, Bonnie. I'm not going to let anyone, family or otherwise, destroy what's important to me." As they walked back toward the mansion, hand in hand, Bonnie felt something shift inside her chest. For the first time since learning about the pregnancy, she felt genuinely hopeful about the future. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she wouldn't face them alone. The next few days passed in a blur of quiet contentment. Finley began working from home more often, claiming he needed to be available for important calls, but really just wanting to spend time with Bonnie. They took long walks together, shared meals in Eleanor's sunny breakfast nook, and talked for hours about everything and nothing. Eleanor watched their growing closeness with obvious approval, often making excuses to leave them alone together. "Young love needs room to breathe," she would say with a knowing smile, before disappearing into her study or the garden. It was during one of these quiet afternoons, several weeks after their conversation in the garden, while Bonnie was reading in the library and Finley was working at his laptop nearby, that everything changed. "Bonnie?" Finley's voice was strange, almost urgent. She looked up from her book to find him staring at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "What is it?" Instead of answering, he closed his laptop and moved to kneel beside her chair. Her heart began to race as he took her hands in his. "I know this is fast," he began, his voice slightly nervous. "I know we've only been in each other's lives for a few weeks, but Bonnie, I've never been more certain of anything in my life." "Finley, what are you saying?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box, and Bonnie's breath caught in her throat. "I'm saying that I love you," he declared, his voice rich with emotion. "I'm saying that I want to spend the rest of my life making you happy, protecting you, building a family with you." He opened the box to reveal a stunning diamond ring, not ostentatious or flashy, but elegant and timeless. Exactly the kind of ring Bonnie would have chosen for herself if she'd ever dared to dream of such things. "Bonnie Williams," Finley continued, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes, "will you marry me?" For a moment Bonnie couldn't speak. The words seemed to hang in the air between them, too beautiful and impossible to be real. This morning she had been reading quietly, content with the growing friendship between them. And now, "You love me," she whispered. "More than I ever thought possible," Finley replied without hesitation. "I love your kindness, your strength, the way you light up when you talk about teaching. I love how you stand up to my family's cruelty with such dignity. I love the way you protect our baby, the way you've already become such an important part of my grandmother's life." Tears were streaming down Bonnie's cheeks now, but she didn't care. "I love you too," she said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "I've been so afraid to admit it, afraid that someone like you couldn't really want someone like me. But I do. I love you so much it scares me." "Then say yes," Finley urged, his own eyes bright with unshed tears. Say you'll marry me, that you'll let me take care of you and our baby for the rest of our lives." "Yes," Bonnie breathed, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, yes, of course, yes." Finlay slipped the ring onto her finger with shaking hands, then pulled her into his arms for a kiss that was deeper and more passionate than any they had shared before. When they finally broke apart, both were laughing with pure joy. "I can't believe this is real," Bonnie said, staring at the ring on her finger in wonder. "Believe it," Finlay said, pressing his forehead to hers. "You're mine now, and I'm yours. Nothing my family says or does can change that." From the doorway came the sound of gentle applause, and they turned to see Eleanor standing there with tears of happiness in her eyes. "It's about time," she said with a warm smile. "I was beginning to think you two would never figure it out." As Eleanor came forward to admire the ring and offer her congratulations, Bonnie felt a completeness she had never experienced before. She was engaged to the man she loved, carrying his child, and surrounded by at least one family member who truly cared about her happiness. For the first time in her life, she felt like she truly belonged somewhere. But even in her joy, she couldn't shake the feeling that the real battles were just beginning. Chapter 6. Love Deepens. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Finlay's private study as he paced back and forth, his phone pressed to his ear, his voice carrying the authority that had made him one of the most respected businessmen in the city. "I don't care what the board thinks about my personal life, Daniel," he said firmly to his business partner. "The merger goes forward as planned, and if anyone has a problem with my engagement, they can take it up with me directly." Bonnie watched from the doorway, her hand unconsciously moving to the engagement ring that still felt like a beautiful dream on her finger. 3 days had passed since Finlay's proposal, and word had already begun to spread through their social circles. The reactions had been mixed at best. "The Worthington account?" Finlay continued, his jaw tightening. "Tell them that my personal life has no bearing on my professional capabilities, and if they want to take their business elsewhere based on gossip, that's their choice." When he finally hung up, Bonnie could see the tension in his shoulders. She approached quietly, placing her hands on his back and feeling some of the stress leave his body at her touch. "Bad news?" she asked softly. Finlay turned in her arms, pulling her close. "Nothing I can't handle. Some of our business associates are concerned about the speed of our engagement. Apparently, marrying a pregnant woman I've known for less than 2 months raises questions about my judgment." Bonnie's heart sank. Maybe they're right. Maybe we are moving too fast. "No," Finlay said firmly, cupping her face in his hands. "Bonnie, I've spent my entire adult life making calculated, careful decisions. I've built my success on logic and planning, but what I feel for you isn't logical. It's essential. You and our baby are the most important things in my world now." Before she could respond, he kissed her gently, and Bonnie felt her doubts begin to melt away. When they broke apart, his eyes were soft with love. "Tell me about your childhood," she said suddenly. "I want to know everything about you." Finlay's expression grew distant. "It wasn't a happy time. My father died when I was 10, and my mother—" Amanda changed after that. She became obsessed with maintaining our social status, with appearances and what people thought. Andrew and Ashley learned early that love was conditional on meeting her expectations. "But you didn't." "I tried to for a while, but I was never good enough, never the perfect son she wanted. So I stopped trying to please her and focused on building something of my own." He paused, his thumb tracing along her cheekbone. "I think that's why I recognize real love when I see it. I've spent so long surrounded by people who only care about what I can give them." "And you think I'm different?" "I know you are," Finlay said without hesitation. "You loved me before you knew I could take care of you. You've never asked me for anything except acceptance and kindness." Bonnie felt tears prick at her eyes. "I love you so much it terrifies me sometimes." Good. Finley smiled, pulling her closer. Because I plan to spend the rest of my life earning that love every single day. The sound of voices in the hallway interrupted their moment, and they turned to see Amanda approaching the study with Ashley and Andrew in tow. All three wore expressions of barely contained fury. Finley, Amanda's voice was ice-cold as she entered without knocking. We need to discuss this ridiculous engagement announcement. There's nothing to discuss, Finley replied, keeping Bonnie close to his side. Bonnie and I are getting married. End of discussion. Are you completely out of your mind? Ashley exploded. You're going to marry some pregnant nobody and destroy everything our family has built? Watch your tone, Finley warned dangerously. Andrew stepped forward, his expression calculating. Finley, be reasonable. This girl has been in our lives for 6 weeks. 6 weeks. And now you want to make her a Jasper. What will people think? I don't care what people think. Well, you should, Amanda snapped, because your reputation affects all of us. The family name, the business, our social standing, everything is at risk because you can't see past a pretty face and a sob story. Bonnie flinched at the cruel words, but Finley's arm tightened protectively around her. That's enough, Mother. Is it? Amanda's eyes were cold as winter. Have you even confirmed that the baby is yours? Have you done a paternity test? Or are you just taking the word of a girl who showed up on your doorstep with a convenient pregnancy? The baby is mine, Finley said through gritted teeth. So you say. But Amanda has a point, Andrew added smugly. A simple DNA test would settle the question once and for all. Unless, of course, your fiancé has something to hide. Bonnie felt her cheeks burn with humiliation. I don't have anything to hide. The baby is Finley's, and if you need a test to prove it, fine. We'll do whatever you want. Bonnie, no! Finley turned to her, his expression pained. You don't have to prove anything to them. Yes, I do, Bonnie said quietly, because they'll never accept me otherwise, and they'll always find ways to make you doubt me. If a test will give us peace, then let's do it. Amanda's smile was triumphant. How reasonable of you, dear. We'll arrange for the test this afternoon. Actually, Eleanor's voice cut through the tension like a blade. You'll do no such thing. Everyone turned to see the elderly woman standing in the doorway, her small frame radiating authority despite her age. In her hands, she held an ornate wooden box that Bonnie had never seen before. Mother, Amanda said impatiently, this doesn't concern you. Everything that happens in this family concerns me, Eleanor replied, moving into the room with purpose. And I won't stand by while you humiliate a pregnant woman with your suspicions and demands. She approached Bonnie and opened the wooden box, revealing a stunning antique necklace with a pendant that seemed to glow in the morning light. This belonged to my mother and her mother before her. It's been passed down through generations of Jasper women, women who were loved and cherished by their husbands. Eleanor lifted the necklace from the box and turned to Bonnie. I want you to have it, dear. Not because of the baby you're carrying, but because of the woman you are. Because you've brought joy back into my grandson's life and love back into this house. With gentle hands, Eleanor fastened the necklace around Bonnie's neck. The weight of it was substantial, and Bonnie could feel the history and love it represented. Mother, you can't be serious, Amanda gasped. That necklace is a family heirloom. And Bonnie is family, Eleanor said firmly. She's going to be Finley's wife and the mother of his child. She deserves to be treated with respect and love, not subjected to your cruel suspicions. Ashley's face was red with anger. This is insane. You're all acting like this girl is some kind of saint when she's obviously just a gold digger who got pregnant on purpose. That's it, Finley's voice was deadly quiet. Ashley, you have until tonight to find somewhere else to live. I won't have you in this house speaking to my fiancé that way. You can't kick me out. Watch me. Finley's expression was stone cold. And that goes for anyone else who thinks it's acceptable to treat Bonnie with anything less than the respect she deserves. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Amanda's face was flushed with fury, but she seemed to realize that Finley was serious about his threats. "This isn't over," she said finally, her voice tight with controlled rage. "Yes, it is," Eleanor said calmly. "Finley has made his choice, and it's a good one. Anyone who can't accept that is welcome to leave." As Amanda, Andrew, and Ashley filed out of the room, their faces dark with anger, Eleanor turned to Finley and Bonnie with a warm smile. "Now then," she said cheerfully, "shall we start planning a wedding?" That evening, Finley led Bonnie to his private quarters for the first time. The suite was elegant but comfortable, decorated in warm earth tones that made it feel like a sanctuary from the rest of the mansion. "Are you sure about this?" Bonnie asked nervously as they stood in his bedroom. "Your family already thinks I'm trying to trap you. If they find out I spent the night here—" "Let them think whatever they want," Finley said, pulling her into his arms. "You're going to be my wife, Bonnie. I want to wake up next to you every morning for the rest of my life." He kissed her then, soft and sweet at first, but growing more passionate as she responded. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. "I love you," Bonnie whispered against his lips. "I love you too," Finley replied, his hands tangling in her hair. "More than words can express." This time, when he kissed her, there was no hesitation, no holding back. Bonnie felt herself melting into him, all her fears and doubts disappearing in the face of his love and desire. When they finally came together, it was with a tenderness and burning passion that left them both utterly breathless and profoundly changed. Afterward, as they lay entwined in each other's arms, Bonnie felt a soul-deep completeness she had never imagined possible. "No regrets?" Finley asked softly, pressing a kiss to her temple. "None," Bonnie replied, snuggling closer to his warmth. "For the first time in my life, I feel like I'm exactly where I belong." Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows with the promise of another storm. But inside, wrapped in Finley's arms, with their baby growing safely between them and Eleanor's family heirloom around her neck, Bonnie felt nothing but peace. She was home at last, and no amount of family opposition could change that. She was a Jasper now, in all but name, and she would fight for her place in this family with everything she had. The battle lines had been drawn, but love would be her armor, and Finley would be her strength. Together, they could weather any storm. Chapter 7. The Proposal. The golden hour of sunset painted the mansion's rooftop terrace in shades of amber and rose, creating a scene so breathtaking that Bonnie could hardly believe it was real. Finley had been secretive all day, claiming he had important business calls to make while sending her meaningful looks that made her heart flutter. Eleanor had been equally mysterious, insisting that Bonnie spend the afternoon being pampered by a team of stylists who had appeared as if by magic. Now, as she stood at the edge of the terrace in a flowing cream-colored dress that accommodated her growing belly beautifully, Bonnie felt like she was living in a fairy tale. Hundreds of white roses had been arranged around the space, their sweet fragrance mixing with the cool evening air. "You look absolutely radiant," Finley's voice came from behind her, warm and full of love. She turned to find him approaching, devastatingly handsome, in a perfectly tailored dark suit. But it was the expression in his eyes that took her breath away, pure adoration mixed with nervous anticipation. "Finley, what is all this?" she asked, gesturing to the romantic setup around them. "This," he said, taking her hands in his, "is me trying to give you the proposal you deserve. The first time was spontaneous, born from love but lacking in romance. You deserve something beautiful, something worthy of the incredible woman you are." As Finley led her to the center of the terrace, where a small table had been set with champagne glasses and a single white rose, Bonnie's heart began to race with anticipation. "When I was a boy," Finley began, his voice soft with memory. My grandmother used to tell me stories about true love, about how someday I would find someone who would make all the loneliness disappear, someone who would see past the money and the name and love me for who I really am. He paused, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her hands. I stopped believing those stories years ago. I convinced myself that love was just a pretty word people used to justify their desires, that real connection was impossible in a world where everyone wanted something from me. Finley ... Bonnie whispered, tears already starting to blur her vision. Then I met you, he continued, his own eyes bright with emotion. That night at the charity gala, you looked at me like I was just a man, not a bank account or a business opportunity. You talked to me about books and dreams and the way the city lights looked from high places. You made me remember what it felt like to be human. The sun was sinking lower now, casting everything in a warm, golden glow that made the moment feel suspended in time. When you disappeared the next morning, I thought I'd lost my chance at something real. I threw myself into work, tried to forget, but I couldn't stop thinking about you, about your laugh, your smile, the way you made me feel like I could be better than I was. Finley released her hands and took a step back, reaching into his jacket pocket. And then fate brought you back to me, carrying our child, needing my help. But what started as obligation became something so much more. He dropped gracefully to one knee, and Bonnie gasped, her hands flying to her mouth in shock. The engagement ring he revealed was utterly magnificent, larger and more exquisite than the first, clearly chosen with meticulous care and boundless love. Bonnie Williams, Finley said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. You have filled the empty spaces in my life with light and love and hope. You've shown me what it means to want to protect something more precious than money or power. He paused, his love shining in his expression. You've made me a better man, and I want to spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of you. The tears were flowing freely now, but Bonnie didn't care. The love in Finley's voice, the sincerity in his expression, the romance of this perfect moment, it was everything she had never dared to dream of. Will you marry me? He asked, holding up the ring that caught the last rays of sunlight and scattered them like tiny rainbows. Will you be my wife, my partner, the mother of our children? Will you help me build a family based on love instead of obligation? Yes, Bonnie breathed, her voice choked with tears of joy. Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes. Finley slipped the new ring onto her finger beside the first one, creating a stunning set that sparkled brilliantly in the fading light. Then he stood and swept her into his arms, spinning her around as they both laughed with pure happiness. When he set her down, they were both breathless and grinning like teenagers. I love you so much, Bonnie said, framing his face with her hands. I love you so much, it scares me sometimes. Don't be scared, Finley murmured, pressing his forehead to hers. We're going to have the most beautiful life together, you and me and our baby. Speaking of the baby, Bonnie said with a shy smile, I have something to tell you. Finley's eyes widened with curiosity. What? I had another ultrasound yesterday while you were making your mysterious phone calls. Bonnie laughed at his stunned expression. Dr. Harrison wanted to double-check something from my 12-week scan, and that's when we confirmed what she suspected. We're having a son. For a moment, Finley was speechless. Then a slow grin spread across his face, and he let out a whoop of joy that echoed across the rooftop. A son! Bonnie, we're having a son! He picked her up again, spinning her more carefully this time, both of them laughing and crying at the same time. When he set her down, he immediately dropped to his knees and pressed gentle kisses to her belly. Hello, son, he whispered to her bump. Daddy loves you so much already. The tenderness in his voice, The awe and love on his face as he spoke to their unborn child made Bonnie's heart overflow with emotion. This man, this wonderful, complicated, beautiful man, was going to be the father of her son and her husband. "What do you think we should name him?" Bonnie asked, running her fingers through his hair as he remained kneeling before her. "Something strong," Finley said immediately, looking up at her with such love that she felt dizzy. "Something that will remind him every day that he's loved and wanted and precious." "He will be," Bonnie said with quiet certainty. "With you as his father. How could he be anything else?" As the last light faded from the sky and the first stars began to appear, they stood together on the terrace, wrapped in each other's arms and lost in dreams of their future. The city spread out below them, twinkling with a million lights. But all that mattered was this moment, this love, this perfect beginning. "When do you want to have the wedding?" Finley asked, pressing soft kisses along her temple. "Soon," Bonnie replied without hesitation. "I don't want to wait. I want to be your wife, officially and completely." "Next month?" Finley suggested. "That gives us time to plan something beautiful, but not so long that we have to wait forever." "Perfect," Bonnie agreed, then hesitated. "What about your family? They're going to try to stop this, aren't they?" Finley's jaw tightened slightly. "Let them try. Nothing and no one is going to keep me from marrying you, Bonnie. I promise you that." As if summoned by their conversation, the sound of footsteps on the terrace stairs announced someone's arrival. They turned to see Eleanor approaching, her face glowing with happiness as she took in the romantic scene. "Oh, my dears," she said, clasping her hands together, "this is absolutely beautiful. Did everything go according to plan?" "Grandmother," Finley said with a grin, "thank you for helping arrange all this. It's perfect." "You deserve romance, my dear," Eleanor said, embracing Bonnie warmly. "You deserve all the beautiful things life has to offer." As they stood together on the terrace, 3 generations united by love rather than mere blood, Bonnie felt a deep sense of rightness settle over her. This was her family now, these people who had chosen to love and protect her. The wind picked up, carrying with it the scent of roses and the promise of autumn, but Bonnie felt only warmth. In Finley's arms, with their son growing safely inside her and Eleanor's blessing surrounding them, she was exactly where she belonged. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, she was sure. Amanda, Andrew and Ashley wouldn't give up their opposition easily. There would be wedding planning to do, business pressures to navigate, and the complicated dynamics of blending her simple background with Finley's sophisticated world. But tonight, none of that mattered. Tonight was perfect, and she intended to hold on to every moment of it. "I love you," she whispered to Finley as they slow danced to music only they could hear. "I love you too," he whispered back, "forever and always." And as the stars wheeled overhead and the city hummed with life below, Bonnie believed with all her heart that forever was exactly what they would have. Chapter 8. The Accusation. The scream that pierced the morning silence 6 weeks later sent ice through Bonnie's veins as she rushed down the hallway toward Eleanor's bedroom, her 6-month pregnant belly making her movements awkward but determined. She found Eleanor collapsed beside her bed, unconscious and terrifyingly pale. The elderly woman's breathing was labored and shallow, and her skin had taken on an alarming greyish pallor that spoke of serious poisoning. "Eleanor!" Bonnie dropped to her knees beside the fallen woman, her hands shaking as she checked for a pulse. It was there, but weak and irregular. "Someone help! Please, someone help!" Footsteps thundered down the hallway as the rest of the household responded to her cries. Finley arrived first, still in his pajamas, his face going white when he saw his grandmother's condition. "Call an ambulance," he ordered, dropping down beside Bonnie. "Now!" Amanda, Andrew and Ashley appeared in the doorway, their expressions ranging from concern to something that looked almost like satisfaction. It was Ashley who spoke first, her voice dripping with false worry. "Oh my goodness, what happened? Was anyone else here when this occurred?" "I found her like this," Bonnie said, her voice shaking. "I heard her scream and came running." "How convenient," Andrew muttered under his breath, but loud enough for everyone to hear. Finley's head snapped up. "What did you say?" "Nothing, brother. Just worried about grandmother, of course." The paramedics arrived within minutes, and the next hour passed in a blur of medical terminology and urgent activity. Eleanor was rushed to the hospital, still unconscious, while the family followed in tense silence. At the hospital, Dr. Peterson emerged from the emergency room with a grim expression that made Bonnie's heart sink. "She's been poisoned," he announced grimly. "Oleander toxin in her bloodstream. We're running comprehensive tests to determine the exact concentration, but her condition is critical." "Poisoned?" Finley's voice was hollow with shock. "How is that possible? Someone gave her something toxic, either deliberately or accidentally. We need to know everything she ate or drank in the past 24 hours. Amanda stepped forward, her face the picture of maternal concern. "Doctor, I'm Eleanor's daughter-in-law. Is there anything specific we should know? Any suspects we should be considering?" The doctor looked uncomfortable. "That's really a matter for the police. They'll want to interview everyone who had access to Mrs. Jasper." As if summoned by his words, 2 police officers appeared in the waiting room. Detective Morris, a stern-faced woman in her 40s, and Detective Chen, a younger man with sharp, observant eyes. "We need to speak with each of you individually," Detective Morris announced. "This is now a criminal investigation." The interviews began immediately. Bonnie sat in the small conference room, her hands protectively cradling her belly as Detective Morris fired questions at her. "You found Mrs. Jasper this morning?" "Yes, I heard her scream and went to check on her." "What time was this?" "Around 7:30. I was getting ready for the day when I heard the noise." "And you were the first person to reach her?" "Yes." Detective Morris made notes in her pad. "Tell me about your relationship with Mrs. Jasper." "She's been wonderful to me, kind, supportive like the grandmother I never had." Bonnie's voice broke slightly, her hand instinctively moving to her 24-week pregnant belly. "She's the only one in this family who's truly welcomed me." "The only one?" Detective Morris looked up sharply. "Are you saying other family members have been hostile toward you?" Bonnie hesitated. She didn't want to make things worse, but she couldn't lie to the police. "There's been some tension. They don't approve of my relationship with Finley." "What kind of tension?" "They think I'm not suitable for him, that I'm only interested in his money." The words tasted bitter in her mouth, but they were true. Detective Morris leaned forward. "Has anyone made specific threats? Suggested you should leave?" "They've made it clear they want me gone, but no direct threats. Nothing like this." The interview continued for another 20 minutes before Bonnie was released. As she walked back to the waiting room, she could hear raised voices from one of the other conference rooms where Andrew was being questioned. "Of course there are tensions. The girl showed up pregnant, claiming the baby is Finley's, and suddenly she's living in our house and engaged to my brother. Anyone with half a brain would be suspicious." Bonnie's cheeks burned with humiliation. Even now, with Eleanor fighting for her life, they were still trying to paint her as the villain. When all the interviews were complete, the family gathered in the waiting room while Eleanor remained in intensive care. The silence was heavy and accusatory, with meaningful glances being exchanged between Amanda, Andrew, and Ashley. It was Amanda who finally broke the silence. "Well," she said, her voice carefully neutral, "this is certainly a shocking development." "Grandmother is going to be fine," Finley said firmly, but Bonnie could hear the uncertainty in his voice. "Of course she will," Ashley agreed, "assuming whoever did this to her doesn't try again." The implication hung in the air like poison itself. Bonnie felt all eyes turn toward her and her blood ran cold. "What are you suggesting?" Finley asked dangerously. Andrew leaned forward, his expression grave. "Finley, we have to face facts. Eleanor was the only one in this family who supported your relationship with her." He gestured toward Bonnie without actually saying her name. She was the only thing standing between Bonnie and the family's unanimous disapproval. "That's ridiculous," Finley snapped. "Bonnie would never hurt grandmother. She loves her." "Does she?" Amanda asked quietly. "Or does she love what Eleanor represents? Acceptance into our family, access to our wealth, legitimacy for her child." Bonnie felt like she couldn't breathe. "How can you even suggest such a thing? Eleanor has been nothing but kind to me. She's like family to me." "Exactly," Ashley said with a cold smile. "She was the only thing standing in the way of you having complete control over Finley. With her gone—" "Stop it!" Finley's voice echoed through the waiting room. "All of you just stop. Bonnie didn't do this." "Then who did?" Andrew challenged. "The staff has been with the family for years. We've all lived together peacefully until she arrived. The timing is rather suspicious, don't you think?" Detective Morris appeared in the doorway, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Jasper, we need to speak with you again." As Finley was led away, Bonnie found herself alone with his family for the first time since the accusations had begun. The silence was suffocating. "You know," Amanda said conversationally, "it's interesting how these things happen. Eleanor was planning to update her will this week. She'd already made the appointment with her attorney." Bonnie's head snapped up. "What?" "Oh yes," Ashley chimed in. "She told me just yesterday that she wanted to include you and the baby in her inheritance. Quite generous, really, considering you've only been in our lives for a few months." "I didn't know about any will," Bonnie said desperately. "I never asked for anything from Eleanor except friendship." "Of course you didn't ask," Andrew said smoothly. "You're much too clever for that. But it's amazing how convenient the timing is, isn't it? Right before she makes you wealthy in your own right, she mysteriously falls ill." The accusations swirled around Bonnie like a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. Every kind gesture Eleanor had shown her, every moment of acceptance and love, was being twisted into evidence of her greed and manipulation. When Finley returned, his face was pale and strained. "They want to search the house," he announced. "Look for evidence of whatever poisoned her." "Good," Amanda said immediately. "The sooner we get to the bottom of this, the better." The search took hours. Bonnie sat in the hospital waiting room, watching through the windows as police officers combed through Eleanor's belongings, dusted for fingerprints, and bagged potential evidence. It was Detective Chen who emerged with the devastating news. "We found these in Miss Williams's room," he announced, holding up an evidence bag containing several small vials of what looked like plant extracts, hidden in the back of her dresser drawer. Bonnie stared at the vials in shock. "I've never seen those before in my life." "They contain concentrated oleander extract," Detective Chen continued, "highly toxic and consistent with what we found in Mrs. Jasper's system." "No," Bonnie whispered, her hand moving instinctively to protect her belly. "No, this isn't possible. Someone planted those. I would never hurt Eleanor." But she could see the confusion and pain in Finley's eyes, the way the manufactured evidence was designed to create doubt. The police presence, the planted vials, the family's coordinated accusations. It was a carefully orchestrated attack meant to destroy their bond. "I think," Detective Morris said quietly, "we're going to need you to come with us, Miss Williams." As the handcuffs clicked around her wrists, Bonnie looked desperately at Finley. "You have to believe me," she pleaded. "I didn't do this. I love Eleanor. I would never hurt her." Finley stood frozen, his face a mask of confusion and pain. Behind him, Amanda, Andrew, and Ashley watched with expressions of grim satisfaction. "Please," Bonnie whispered as the officers led her away. "Please don't let them destroy what we have. I'm innocent, you have to believe me." But as the hospital doors closed behind her, Bonnie wasn't sure anyone believed her anymore, not even the man she loved. Chapter 9. The Darkest Hour. The merciless fluorescent lights in the police station interrogation room buzzed overhead like angry wasps, casting harsh shadows that made Bonnie feel exposed and defenseless as she sat across from Detective Morris, her 24-week pregnant belly a constant reminder of everything she stood to lose. "Let's go through this one more time, Miss Williams," Detective Morris said, her voice professionally neutral but tinged with suspicion. "You claim you've never seen these vials before, yet they were found in your personal belongings." Bonnie's hands trembled as she stared at the evidence bag containing the oleander extract. 6 hours of questioning had left her exhausted and emotionally drained, but she refused to break. "I told you, someone planted them there. I would never hurt Eleanor. She's been nothing but kind to me." "Yet you stand to inherit significantly from her will," Detective Chen interjected from his position by the door. "A will that was scheduled to be updated this week to include you and your unborn child." "I didn't even know about the will." Bonnie's voice cracked with frustration. "Eleanor never mentioned it to me." "Convenient," Detective Morris made a note in her file. "Tell me about your relationship with the other family members. We understand there's been significant tension since your arrival." Bonnie closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the accusations that had been building for months. "They've made it clear they don't want me there. They think I'm after Finley's money." "Are you?" The blunt question hit like a physical blow. "Number, I love him. I loved him before I even knew who he was. Yet you ended up pregnant after one night with a millionaire. Some might call that opportunistic." Bonnie's cheeks burned with shame, not for what she'd done, but for how it was being twisted. "It wasn't like that. What happened between us was real, unexpected. I didn't plan any of this." The questioning continued relentlessly. Outside, Bonnie could see through the small window that night had fallen, which meant she'd been here for nearly 12 hours. Her back ached from the uncomfortable chair, and the baby was moving restlessly, as if sensing her distress. "I need to use the bathroom," she said finally. Detective Morris nodded curtly. "Officer Johnson will escort you." In the harsh light of the police station bathroom, Bonnie caught sight of herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. Her face was pale and drawn, her eyes red-rimmed from exhaustion and tears. The engagement rings on her finger felt heavy, mocking her with their promise of a happiness that seemed to be slipping away. When she returned to the interrogation room, Detective Morris was speaking quietly with someone outside. Through the slightly open door, Bonnie caught fragments of conversation. "Family attorney is here, wants to press charges. Enough evidence to—" Her heart sank. Finley's family wasn't content with just having her arrested. They wanted her prosecuted to the full extent of the law. "Miss Williams," Detective Morris returned, her expression more serious than before. "I have some updates on Mrs. Jasper's condition." Bonnie leaned forward anxiously. "Is she—" "She's stable, but still unconscious. The doctors say the next 24 hours are critical." Detective Morris sat down heavily. "Her family has provided us with some additional information about recent events in the household." "What kind of information?" "According to Mr. Andrew Jasper, you were seen near Mrs. Jasper's room several times in the past week, including late at night when you claimed to be asleep." "I was checking on her," Bonnie protested. "She's been my friend. Sometimes she has trouble sleeping and we'd talk." "Convenient opportunities to slip something into her nightly tea." "I never— Eleanor makes her own tea. I wouldn't even know how to—" But even as she said it, Bonnie remembered the nights when Eleanor had asked her to help prepare her bedtime routine. The innocent moments of friendship were being twisted into evidence of premeditation. Miss Ashley Jasper also reports that you've been asking questions about the family's financial arrangements, Detective Chen added, showing unusual interest in inheritance matters. That's not true. Bonnie's voice rose with desperation. I've never asked about money. I don't care about their money. Yet you're engaged to one of the wealthiest men in the city, Detective Morris observed, pregnant with a child that will secure your financial future regardless of whether the marriage proceeds. The cold calculation in her voice made Bonnie feel sick. Everything she'd thought was love and acceptance was being reframed as manipulation and greed. A knock on the door interrupted the interrogation. Officer Johnson entered and whispered something to Detective Morris, whose eyebrows rose slightly. "Miss Williams, there's someone here to see you." Bonnie's heart leaped with hope. "Finley, your attorney." A middle-aged woman in a crisp suit entered the room, introducing herself as Sarah Mitchell from the Public Defender's Office. As she sat beside Bonnie and reviewed the charges, Bonnie felt her world crumbling around her. Attempted murder in the first degree and conspiracy to commit murder. Attorney Mitchell read from her notes. The evidence is largely circumstantial, but the poison being found in your room is problematic. Someone planted it there, Bonnie insisted. Amanda, Ashley, Andrew, any of them could have done it. They want me gone. That's a serious accusation. Do you have any proof of their animosity beyond verbal disagreements? Bonnie thought desperately about the months of cruel comments, deliberate humiliations and family meetings where she'd felt like an unwelcome intruder. But how do you prove a pattern of emotional cruelty? How do you document the way someone looks at you with disgust, or the calculated nature of their kindness when others are watching? "They've been trying to turn Finley against me since the day I arrived," she said finally, "but they've been clever about it. Never anything direct enough to be called evidence." Attorney Mitchell made notes, but her expression remained skeptical. "Miss Williams, I have to ask, is there any possibility that your fiancé arranged for this evidence to be planted? Any reason he might want you out of the picture?" The question hit Bonnie like a physical blow. Never. Finley loves me. Men have been known to change their minds, especially when family pressure mounts. And you do represent a significant financial liability if you were to divorce and claim support for the child. "You don't understand," Bonnie said desperately. "Finley isn't like that. He's been protecting me from his family, defending me." But even as she said it, doubt crept in. Where was Finley now? Why hadn't he come to see her? Why hadn't he posted bail or hired her a better attorney? Hours passed. The interrogation resumed, covering the same ground over and over until Bonnie felt like her mind was fragmenting. Every memory was being dissected, every interaction with Eleanor re-examined through the lens of suspicion. It was nearly dawn when Detective Morris finally closed her file. "Miss Williams, you're being formally charged with attempted murder in the first degree and conspiracy to commit murder. Your arraignment is scheduled for tomorrow morning." As they led her to a holding cell, Bonnie caught sight of herself in another mirror. The woman staring back looked broken, defeated. Her hands moved protectively over her belly, where the baby was shifting restlessly at 24 weeks gestation. "I'm sorry," she whispered to her unborn child. "Mama's in trouble, but I promise I'll find a way to protect you." The holding cell was small and cold, with a narrow bench and a thin blanket that smelled of disinfectant. Bonnie curled up as best she could with her pregnant belly and tried to make sense of what was happening. Someone had deliberately poisoned Eleanor and framed her for it. The same people who had been trying to drive her away from the beginning had finally found a way to destroy her completely. But why? What did they gain from Eleanor being hurt? Unless A chill ran down Bonnie's spine as she remembered Amanda's words about Eleanor changing her will. What if this wasn't about getting rid of Bonnie at all? What if Eleanor was the real target, and framing Bonnie was just a convenient way to deflect suspicion? The bail hearing was a nightmare of legal terminology and cold procedural language. Bonnie stood before the judge in an orange jumpsuit that barely fit over her pregnant belly, feeling like she was watching someone else's life fall apart. The fluorescent courtroom lights made her skin look sallow, and she could feel the weight of judgment from everyone present. Given the serious nature of the charges and the defendant's lack of community ties, the prosecutor argued, his voice clinical and detached, "We request bail be denied. The defendant poses a flight risk and a potential danger to other family members." "Your Honor," Attorney Mitchell countered, standing with more confidence than Bonnie felt, "my client is 24 weeks pregnant and has no prior criminal record. She poses no flight risk and has been cooperative throughout this investigation." The judge looked stern as he reviewed the paperwork, his reading glasses perched on his nose. The silence stretched unbearably as Bonnie's future hung in the balance. Bail is set at $500,000. Bonnie's legs nearly gave out. $500,000 might as well have been $5 million. She had no access to that kind of money, no family who could help, no resources beyond what Finley might provide, and Finley was nowhere to be seen. As they led her back to the holding cell, Bonnie saw Amanda, Andrew, and Ashley in the courthouse hallway, speaking quietly with their attorney. Amanda's expression was satisfied, almost triumphant. "No sign of the fiancé," she heard Andrew say. "Smart man, cutting his losses before it's too late." The words hit Bonnie like daggers. Was that what this was? Had Finley decided she was too much trouble, too much of a liability? Back in her cell, Bonnie lay on the narrow bench and stared at the ceiling. The baby was moving more actively now at 24 weeks gestation, as if sensing her distress. She placed her hands on her belly and tried to project calm and love, even as her own world crumbled around her. "I won't let them win," she whispered fiercely. "I don't know how, but I'll prove my innocence. I'll protect you, and I'll find a way back to your father." But as the hours dragged by with no word from Finley, no visit, no sign that he still believed in her innocence, Bonnie felt her resolve weakening. Perhaps Amanda had been right all along. Perhaps she really was just a poor girl who had reached too high, dreamed too big, and was now paying the price for thinking she could belong in a world that had never been meant for her. The fluorescent light hummed overhead, marking time in a place where hope seemed as distant as the stars she couldn't see through the small barred window. Somewhere beyond these walls, Eleanor lay unconscious, fighting for her life. Somewhere beyond these walls, the real culprit walked free, and somewhere beyond these walls, the man she loved was making a choice about whether their love was worth fighting for. As night fell again, Bonnie could only wait and pray that when morning came, it would bring answers instead of more accusations, hope instead of despair. But in the darkness of the holding cell, with her baby stirring restlessly inside her and her engagement rings the only reminder of happier times, hope felt like a luxury she could no longer afford. Chapter 10. Truth and New Beginnings. The agonizing sound of Bonnie's cry reverberated through the holding cell as another powerful contraction seized her body, more intense than the last, sending crushing waves of pain through her already depleted frame at 28 weeks pregnant. "Help!" she called out desperately, clutching the metal bars. "Something's wrong! The baby is coming!" The stress of the past 48 hours had pushed her body beyond its limits. At 28 weeks pregnant, the baby was arriving early, triggered by the emotional trauma of false accusations and imprisonment. Officer Johnson rushed to her cell, took one look at Bonnie's pale, pain-stricken face, and immediately called for an ambulance. "Prisoner in labor, requesting immediate medical transport." As the paramedics worked to stabilize her for transport, Bonnie felt another crushing contraction. Through the haze of pain, she could only think of one thing: her baby needed to survive, even if she didn't make it through this nightmare. The ambulance ride was a blur of sirens and medical equipment. At the hospital, they rushed her past the same waiting room where she'd last seen Finley, past the intensive care unit where Eleanor still lay unconscious. "We need to perform an emergency delivery." Dr. Harrison's voice carried urgent authority as they rushed her into the delivery room. "At 28 weeks, this is premature but viable. Alert the NICU team immediately for preterm delivery." But Bonnie's body had other plans. The stress, the fear, the heartbreak, it had all taken its toll. I can't stop it," she gasped between contractions. "Then we deliver safely, Doctor," Harrison said firmly. "Prep the NICU team immediately." As Bonnie fought through the most difficult moments of her life, completely alone and facing the possibility of losing everything she'd ever loved, a different drama was unfolding 3 floors above. Eleanor Jasper's eyes suddenly fluttered open. The elderly woman looked around the intensive care unit in confusion, trying to remember how she'd gotten there. The last thing she recalled was making her morning tea and then feeling violently ill. Mrs. Jasper, the nurse on duty, rushed to her bedside. "You're awake. How are you feeling?" "Confused," Eleanor said weakly. "What happened to me?" "You were poisoned, Mom. You've been unconscious for 2 days." Eleanor's eyes blazed with fierce indignation. "Bonnie would never hurt me. She's the one who saved my life. I remember everything now. I was feeling violently ill, completely disoriented, and Bonnie found me collapsed. She stayed with me, held my hand, called for help immediately. If she hadn't discovered me when she did, I would have died alone on that floor. Mrs. Jasper, I need to call the police immediately." But Eleanor was already reaching for the phone beside her bed. "Get me my grandson first, and then get me Detective Morris. That girl is innocent, and I know exactly who really tried to kill me." 20 minutes later, Finley burst into Eleanor's room, his face haggard from 2 days of agonizing doubt and sleepless nights. "Grandmother, thank God you're awake," he said, rushing to her bedside. "Finley, where is Bonnie? Please tell me you didn't abandon that sweet girl." Finley's face crumpled with guilt and pain. "The evidence, it looked so damning. I didn't know what to believe." Eleanor's eyes flashed with anger. "You didn't know what to believe? About the woman who loves you more than life itself? About the mother of your child? Child. She's having your son, you foolish boy, and if you've let doubt poison your heart against her, you're no better than the rest of this family." Before Finley could respond, Detective Morris arrived with Detective Chen. Eleanor's voice was strong and clear as she recounted the real events. "Amanda poisoned my tea," she said without preamble. "I saw her in my kitchen that morning, claimed she was making me breakfast, but I felt wrong immediately after drinking the tea she prepared." Detective Morris leaned forward intently. "You're certain it was Amanda?" "Absolutely. And I guarantee if you check the security footage properly, you'll see her in my room multiple times over the past week. She had plenty of opportunities to plant those vials in Bonnie's belongings." "But why would she poison you?" Eleanor's laugh was bitter. "Because I was changing my will to include Bonnie and the baby. Amanda couldn't stand the thought of sharing the family wealth with an outsider, so she decided to eliminate me and frame Bonnie in one stroke." Detective Chen was already on his radio, calling for Amanda's immediate arrest. But Eleanor wasn't finished. "Check Amanda's study," she continued. "She grows oleander in her private greenhouse, claims it's for decoration, but I've always wondered why she needed so much of such a poisonous plant." As the detectives rushed out to execute arrest warrants, Finley sat beside his grandmother's bed, his head in his hands. "I've destroyed everything," he said quietly. "I doubted her when she needed me most. I let them convince me that she could be capable of hurting you. Then you'd better fix it, Eleanor said firmly. That girl has been through hell because of this family's cruelty. You owe her more than an apology. You owe her your complete faith and protection for the rest of your lives. A nurse appeared in the doorway. Mr. Jasper, there's an emergency. Miss Williams is in labor. Finley's face went white. What? But it's too early. The stress-triggered premature labor. She's been asking for you. Finley ran through the hospital corridors as if his life depended on it. When he burst into the delivery room, he found Bonnie pale and exhausted, fighting to bring their child safely into the world. Bonnie, he breathed, rushing to her side. She looked up at him with tears streaming down her face. You came. I'm so sorry, he said, taking her hand and kissing it desperately. I should have believed you. I should have trusted you. Can you ever forgive me? Another contraction hit, and Bonnie gripped his hand tightly. The baby, she gasped. Is he going to be okay? He's going to be perfect, Finley said firmly, just like his mother. 50 minutes later, their son entered the world, small at just over 3 pounds, but breathing steadily with medical assistance. The specialized NICU team immediately wrapped him in warming blankets and connected him to monitoring equipment, their movements swift and practiced. He's doing well for 28 weeks, Dr. Harrison announced with cautious optimism. Strong heartbeat, good muscle tone. He'll need to stay in the NICU for several weeks, but his vital signs are encouraging. As the medical team carefully placed their baby boy in a specialized incubator with multiple monitors and warming lights, both parents wept with relief and overwhelming love. The infant was tiny but alert, his delicate features clearly visible through the clear walls of his protective chamber as machines helped support his developing lungs. He's beautiful, Bonnie whispered, exhausted but radiant, watching through the incubator's clear walls as their son was connected to monitors. Just like his mother, Finley repeated, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead while holding her hand as they both gazed at their precious baby. The next morning, news of Amanda's arrest spread through the hospital and beyond. The security footage had indeed shown her entering Bonnie's room multiple times, and the oleander plants in her greenhouse provided clear evidence of her guilt. Andrew and Ashley, faced with the truth of their mother's crimes and their own complicity in framing Bonnie, quickly made arrangements to leave the city permanently. Eleanor, now fully recovered and more determined than ever, arrived at Bonnie's hospital room with her lawyer in tow. "My dear," she said, embracing Bonnie carefully, "I owe you my life, and I owe you the most sincere apology for what my family put you through." "You don't owe me anything," Bonnie said softly. "You've been nothing but kind to me." "Nevertheless," Eleanor smiled, "I want to make things right." She turned to her lawyer. "Execute the new will immediately. Bonnie and the baby are to receive equal shares with Finley. This family owes her a debt we can never fully repay." That afternoon, Finley helped Bonnie pack her few belongings as they prepared to leave the hospital and return home. Home. The word had never sounded so beautiful. "I have something to ask you," Finley said as he gently helped her into the wheelchair for discharge. "What?" "Will you marry me? Again, I mean. The right way this time, with my complete faith and trust, with my grandmother's blessing, and with no doubt in my heart about how much I love you." Bonnie smiled through her happy tears. "Yes, Finley Jasper, I'll marry you." As they prepared to leave the hospital, carrying their precious son and looking forward to a future free from the shadows of doubt and cruelty, a knock came at the door. Bonnie looked up to see two familiar figures standing hesitantly in the doorway, her father Michael and her stepmother Jessica. "Bonnie!" Michael's voice was small, ashamed. Could we come in?" Jessica stepped forward, her hands trembling slightly. "We heard about what happened, about the arrest and the truth coming out. We saw the news reports about Amanda's arrest, and we realized..." She paused, struggling with the words. We realized how wrong we were, how cruel I've been to you. We should have protected you, Michael said, his voice breaking. When I saw those news reports, saw what you went through alone, I knew I had failed as a father. Can you ever forgive us? Bonnie looked at Finlay, who squeezed her hand supportively, then at their sleeping son, and finally at the two people who had caused her so much pain. Yes, she said quietly, her capacity for forgiveness as boundless as her capacity for love. Your family, you're always welcome in our lives. As the afternoon sun streamed through the hospital room windows, filling the space with golden light, their baby boy stirred slightly in his blanket and made the softest, most contented sound. The gentle murmur filled the room with hope, washing away the last shadows of doubt and fear. Bonnie looked around at the faces surrounding her, Finlay's eyes bright with love, Eleanor's expression warm with approval, even Michael and Jessica's faces soft with hope for redemption. This was her family now, complicated, imperfect, but bound together by love and forgiveness rather than obligation and tradition. And as their son continued to rest peacefully in his father's arms, Bonnie knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together as a family built on truth, trust, and the kind of love that could survive any storm.